My colleague to my left is Councilor Kevin Broderick. To my right is Councilor Rita Mercier. Also in attendance is Councilor Rodney Elliott, Councilor Joseph Mendonça, the City Solicitor, Chris O'Connor, the Hearing Officer, Etta Machuk. I hope I pronounced that right, Etta. I believe, is Assistant City Manager Adam Bakey going to be here? No? Okay, all right. With that said, I want to welcome everyone to this meeting, and this subcommittee would like to hear from everyone. Feel free to come to the podium. And with that said, Angela Gitcher, recording clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Caulfield?
Here.
Councilor Broderick?
Here.
Councilor Mercia?
Here.
3 present.
Okay, this meeting pertains to residential parking signs. And Mrs. Miller contacted Councilor Elliott. He brought in a motion. The motion was referred to this subcommittee meeting. And the issue at hand is residential parking signs, and probably signs that aren't warranted or signs that some people are abusing. And I visited Beacon Street today, 135 Beacon Street. The gentleman has a sign way down on his property line, and he has a 2 or 4 car driveway in the front of the house, and on 3rd Street, he has a huge driveway where recreational vehicles parked. And the problem is the sign that's way down the street, if you read the rules and regulations, the sign should be posted in front of the house, front of your doorway, and that entitles you to 1 parking space. So I also went down to Coburn Street, and I saw residents on Coburn Street with 2 parking signs on a particular building. So with that said, the subcommittee will entertain anyone who wants to come to that podium and offer your feelings and what the subcommittee should do about it, and how we should go about probably addressing the problem. So feel free to come to the podium. Just name and address.
Hi, my name is Heidi Miller. I live at 124 Beacon Street, and I've been very frustrated over the last several months. I've had the Lowell Police Department call my home after a guest had arrived and been there 15 minutes. This is during the Halloween storm, and at 131 Beacon Street also has a parking sign. Who chooses not to put it in front of their home? They choose to put it in the middle of their home. So you don't know, like, should I park in front of their home? Should I park on this other side near the telephone pole? You're not sure where to park. So my husband insured my guests to park in the spot by the telephone pole, and that nothing would happen. They still have legally 6 by 20 feet of space. She's not there 15 minutes. The Lowell Police Department are tied up in a storm. My neighbors call and tell the Lowell Police Department that the car, and give the registration number to the police dispatch. They call her home, they call me and demand that I move the vehicle. And I said, no. I said, we're not in her spot. Well, your neighbor is saying that you are in her spot. The residents believe that this entitles them to the entire frontage of their home. And I am frustrated. I don't want to have to deal with the police telling me to go out and straighten it out with my neighbors. I didn't create the ordinance, and I am not gonna be one to have to straighten it out. I feel the city's responsibility is to straighten this issue out. I feel on Beacon Street that we all have driveways. We already have a parking program, and it's on private property. We don't need signs. So I'm just asking that I don't get calls from the police telling me to move the spot. The police are busy. They're dealing with traffic problems. I mean, this has become an entitlement, not a tool to help people without driveways. So I'm asking for help, and I've asked many times.
Before you leave the podium, Mrs. Miller, you told me over the phone that people are ordering these signs over the internet. Can you verify that?
Well, I can't verify that the city signs are used over the internet, but you can
there's no parking
see.
signs.
Right, I couldn't find them, but you can see by the photos that I had given you, there's signs all over the city that say they're going to tow you. There's even a towing company posted on some of these signs that when I called them today, I asked, so how do I get one of these signs? How do I get someone towed? And they said, well, you can get the sign through the city, and you can get all these signs from the internet. We didn't tow anyone today. Did you need someone towed? This is on a private street. This isn't on a private street or a private parking lot. This is on our public streets. I mean, I thought public was accessible to all, and that's why I asked for the legality of these signs.
Okay. I just want to read, the solicitor and the subcommittee have a copy of this. I want to thank Etta for making copies. And this is the rules and regulations that the residents must follow. And it says on one, the first one, there's 6 different rules and regulations they must follow. The first one space is allowed for one vehicle in front of any house. Is this no parking residential sign in front of their home?
No,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Anyone else who'd like to come to the podium?
I have a question for her.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller?
Yes, thank you. Heidi, when you said the police called you.
Yes.
They called you from the police department? How
The
did this
police
happen?
didn't call my home, they called my guest's home. So immediately the mother called, it was my daughter's guest. She was having her hair done. My daughter's a hairdresser, so she was having her hair done at the house. She was going to a Halloween party. So she said, Samantha, you have to move your car, they're gonna tow your car.
So
So I said, no, let me explain to your mother.
So wait a minute, are you saying that the police came and looked at the plate and figured out?
No, the police never came to the plate. The neighbor gave the registration, the plate number to the police. They contacted the home to the resident. The home to the resident, the mother called me.
So no police officer came to the site to look at the situation, is that what you're saying?
Probably half hour after, an officer came because I wouldn't move the car.
And when they did come, what did they see?
They actually told the resident yet again, because I was explained the following Tuesday after this happened on a Saturday night, that storm. The Tuesday I called and I spoke with Mr. Adam Bakey. I also called the law department. I've tried to call anybody and anyone who would listen. And Mr. Adam Bakey told me that prior to this, Inspectional Services, Mrs. Murphy, in the Inspectional Service Office,
Yes.
had gone to both of these residents, 131 and 135, and explained to these residents that they have one spot in front of their home. She asked if they would move it in front of their home. Well, 131 kind of did. It's kind of like in the middle so that they can block 2 spots. But 135 said no. And Mrs. Murphy, when I spoke with her, said, I can't make them move the sign. Well, I have proof
Well,
that she could have taken that sign.
That's right.
Because it wasn't in the proper
That's right.
place. So if I have to follow the rules, they must follow the rules.
Right.
So,
That's what I'm saying. Someone cannot violate the law. If someone from the city went over and told them where to put that sign and they refused, she should have taken that sign back and not be allowed to get one back.
I really don't believe that they know the regulations.
Well, I think they do. I think they don't want to hear it. I think that's the situation, because people can put 3 cars in front of their house, but this sign applies to one vehicle, and that's it. So that if you have a guest at your house, they can park in front of that house. It doesn't say that we park right there, you can't park there. That's how it
Well,
works.
I would honor, if someone didn't have a driveway and I saw a sign that said reserved parking, this is my spot, and it was in front of their home, I would honor that because I think I'd want a spot. But to have these in areas where people have 6 off-street parking spots, two off-street parking spots in a garage, it's insane. It
Yes,
just-
I agree.
I can't see where this is effective anymore because they're everywhere. These signs are everywhere. I don't even think people realize that it's law, because they're buying, I'll tow you, don't park here. They'll buy a black and orange sign, don't park here. I just want help in my neighborhood. I don't want to see the signs. They're not needed. They're just creating a problem. It wasn't something I created. They went in and bought, which they had the right. I just want the city to fix it.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Broderick?
Thank you. No, thank you. I understand the situation over there. I appreciate you bringing this forward and coming down again, because I know you were here at the last meeting. I see 2 issues here. One is the proper usage or proper enforcement issue in the city, enforcement of this, and maybe some miscommunication here or lack of understanding. I'm not certain, but certainly sounds like an enforcement issue. But I also see where we may have to address the ordinance in terms of if it's applied citywide the same way. I would consider this somewhat of a zoning, almost like a zoning issue, that it's not maybe necessary in some situations, and maybe we can put and ask for some feedback from DPD or whomever for some requirements based on necessity. I agree. If someone has 4 parking spaces off-street parking spaces, they don't maybe need a no parking sign. And certainly, if they're not using it properly, then they should lose it. We don't give out deeded street parking for developments. I don't think we're allowed to. And this, I understand this is constitutional, so I'm not suggesting it's not, but this is, for $10, someone's got all the parking they want in front of their house, and they can leave their driveway empty or with 1 car in it because it's more convenient for them not to shuffle cars. I understand why people do it, and, that's their choice right now, but I think that this may be a situation where we want to look at, what I would like to look at is to see where are these signs necessary, some of these neighborhoods that are more congested, and there is no off-street parking, and, there's a need for them versus an entitlement to them. And I think that those 2 issues, maybe we can ask for some type of, and I don't know where this would go to the law department or in conjunction with maybe Mr. Bakey over at DPD to come back with, I guess I would suggest it goes over to DPD in terms of looking at this kind of like a zone by zone, neighborhood by neighborhood, in terms of density issues and parking issues, because there are some neighborhoods where it's necessary and I think some that it's not. And I don't think it should be as a matter of right, but I don't know if that's legal also to put some type of necessity requirement on it. And I guess through the chair, maybe ask the solicitor what types of requirements or restrictions, I guess is maybe the way we put it, can we put on these types of signs?
Sure, any of those types of restrictions could be placed on this type of an ordinance. And in fact, I did, Adam Bakey and I had a lengthy conversation today, similar to what you were just referring to, that potentially taking a look at some of these issues and looking at it based on need and the character of the neighborhood, and as I mentioned in the opinion, the approach of a one-size-fits-all might not really make a lot of sense for the entire city. Various sections of the city have all sorts of different parking needs, and so anyway, that's something that I think rightfully could go to the DPD, and they could begin looking at it and coming back with some proposals that might make more sense given a targeted area of the city, with some of those types of restrictions, that if you have off-street parking, maybe you don't qualify. Also, I think the other thing that needs to be looked at is the fee, which is very low.
This form should be revamped in any event. I don't know if this is a $10 fee for life, or if it's an annual fee.
It's for life, and when you think of...
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It might have been something that's been down here for 50 years and has never really been looked at or challenged. So the reality is, there's no right to tow. That's in bold letters here, but I think people think there is a right to tow. Again, I think we have two issues. One is our enforcement policy and who's enforcing and what are they enforcing, and does everybody understand what the ordinance is? And I think prior to getting to that enforcement piece, I think we have to revamp this as an ordinance and decide where do we want it and what restrictions do we want to put in place. And I would suggest we do it by neighborhood, zone by zone, to find out where we collectively agree it's appropriate. And I think that's,
And that
I'd
would be
put
a
that in the form
motion.
of a motion.
And I'll second it.
And I think that maybe if we could get some feedback as to when, I know Mr. Bakey's not here right now, but, if we could, I understand the holidays are coming up, but, when we might be able to hear back and keep this on the fast track. It should be something relatively, I think, simple to fix, but it certainly is an issue in the neighborhoods. And, now we're coming into the winter, you're going to have people shoveling, space out in front of their house, and it gets a little bit tense in neighborhoods. So I think the sooner we can get to this, the better. And I appreciate you all coming down this evening.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also include one-way streets, because it seems a little bit unfair when you have a one-way street and you only can park on one side on a one-way street, and then people are getting no parking over here. So maybe that's another area that we should be looking at as well.
This residential parking, first of all, I want to recognize Henry Marchand, assistant to the manager, who's in attendance. These residential parking signs were initiated in the early 90s, and it was wholesale at the city clerk's office. And who do you point a finger at? The city back in the 90s didn't do an adequate job of surveying who the signs were going to. And it's like a handicap sign. You have to have proof that you are disabled before you get a handicap sign. People were getting signs that had two-car driveways, maybe parking for 3 cars and so forth. That's what went a little bit off the Richter scale. So you can't point a finger at anyone. The residents went down, and the signs were there. They paid $10. They received a sign. So now we have a problem that we have to address. And what I'd like to see, I see Adam Bakey is here as well. What I'd like to see the city do is to help the problem of Beacon Street enforce this rule, that sign at 135 Beacon Street be placed in front of the dweller's home, in front of the door. And that's regulation number 1, and I think 131 as well, that has to be addressed too, and then we can go on from there. Yeah, Councilor Madonza?
I had a situation regarding one of these signs within the past year, and it's something that I think should be considered as this goes forward. Although, in this particular issue, I think it's a case of a resident abusing the ordinance and trying to reserve more spaces than they're entitled to. In the situation where I dealt with in the past year, there was a resident that needed one of these signs, and they were on a corner lot, so they had frontage on 2 streets. The street that their address was on, there was a guardrail in front of the entire portion of their house. So it wasn't really safe to park there. So they wanted to put the sign on the side street. Now, to me, it seems like that would be okay, but again, only in the case where it only reserves 1 spot along their property. That's it. So where they put it is not as important in some cases as the fact that only 1 spot is reserved. I believe that part of the reason it's wholesale throughout the city is an equal protection thing, constitutionally, so we don't discriminate, so that every property is entitled to the same thing. Now, I know we've already limited it in at least one neighborhood regarding those that had driveways. It hasn't been challenged yet, so we might be able to do it elsewhere. But I think the original thought was that every property owner would be entitled to one. Those that wanted the sign reserving it had to pay the $10. Essentially, every time you want to replace the sign, you have to pay the $10. I agree that it's probably something that should not be for the life of the sign, that probably should be renewed every year so that we know that they want the sign, it's still needed, and that they're willing to pay for it. And that might discourage some from getting it unnecessarily if they don't want to pay the fee year after year. I do know that there's a specific permit number for every sign that's issued. And they have to show that to the officer who comes to enforce it to show that they have basically the form in front of you that has a permit number indicating what the restriction is and what they're entitled to. But in any case, so as we move forward, be careful. I'd like us to be careful how we deal with it as far as constitutionality of it. And I think the fee is a good area to look at, and also that it might be a problem for some property owners if it has to be in front of the house when there's a safer part and a side of the house that's their frontage.
Well,
So, just consider that.
the rules and regulations, when they receive the sign, they receive this. And the rules and regulations said in front of their home, not on the property boundary line. And the problem up on Beacon Street is this person has 75 feet of parking, which they're not entitled to. And that's the problem. Am I right, Mrs. Miller? Okay. Anyone else like to, we have a motion first. We have a motion by Councilor Broderick, seconded by Councilor Rita Mercia, that we take a survey neighborhood by neighborhood and to see if the signs throughout these neighborhoods are warranted and see if there's any violations pertaining to rule number 1 or any rule that the resident received. Roll call? Yes.
Counsel Broderick?
Yes.
Counsel Mercia?
Yes?
3 yeas.
Okay, we're starting on the right track, so we're getting some progress here. Who else would like to come and speak and give us your name and address?
Hi, my name is Marie Brown. I live at 380 Christian Street in Lowell. I think Councilor Broderick hit the nail on the head. I think when you want to put a fence up on your property, whoever's going to give you the permit, somebody goes out and looks at the property to say, okay, it's not on an easement, it's not on someone else's property, all the paperwork is in good order. This, I think, is something that needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. I think right off the bat, when you exclude neighborhoods, there's a lot of the work done. But once, if I came to you and said, I need a parking spot, and I'm living on top of Christian Hill with a big old piece of property with a carriage house that houses 2 cars, and a 5-car driveway and a fence in front of my house that you can put 4 cars in front of, and they have a sign in front of that house that says no parking. There's a problem there. So there must be a way with all the computerized everything we have. So if I came to you and I said, I live at 380 Christian Street, I'd like a sign, why couldn't we Google that and look at the property before somebody says, yes, you can have it? Right? I mean, there has to be, or present something, whether it be a mortgage or a rental agreement or something that states, is there off-street parking? Because if there's off-street parking, then you have no business standing in front of the clerk asking for a sign. It's simple. It's common sense. I have lived where I am for 9 years. We have a neighborhood. Everybody knows everybody. They watched each other's kids grow up. My son has been on his own a long time. He moved back. He had words with my neighbor, who happens to have a big piece of property with a carriage house, with all that frontage I just told you about, and the 5-car driveway. Well, she went online and bought a sign for herself that says, no parking, violators will be towed at their own expense. And then she went one step further. She bought one for our neighbor across the street, because the neighbor across the street doesn't like that the people next to her have 3 kids who now drive. and they park on the street because the driveway is full. So if we could somehow come to some kind of agreement on how these placards are distributed in the first place, then it just makes sense that the enforcement would take care of itself. So that's my thought on it, because I could go on and on about how come my taxes are paying for everybody who has a sign when I have to shovel the front of my house that doesn't have a sign? Who's paying for the pothole that's in front of their house? We are. We're paying for the plowing and the salt and the this and the that. And not to mention the police officers who have to take time out of their day to go and look at somebody's yard, in front of somebody's house and say, oh geez, can they park there or not? It's really nonsense. It's nonsense. And if the people who are gonna have these absolutely need them, Lower Centerville was built next to the river when really the only people who even had a horse and carriage was the ragman and the milkman. They're tiny little streets. They have to take their recycling. Some don't even get recycling. They have to take their garbage barrels out to the end of their street because the trucks just can't get down the street. You know, I have another woman that I know. Her mother's handicapped. She lives down there. She can only they can only park on one side of the street, and there's all signs. The girl has to go and help her mother out. She has to park where it says no parking. You know, I mean, so really, this is needed. It's a needed thing. But there needs to be someone regulating it. There needs to be someone that says, this is your address? Take a little aerial view of it, or, you know, like they do with all the, when you're buying a piece of property. You can go on multiple listings and look at it, take a visual walk. Boy, wouldn't that save a lot of money and a lot of unneeded frustration? Not to mention the fact, you have people coming in from out of town, don't park here, don't park here, don't park here. You think they're ever gonna wanna come and spend any money here? It's not welcoming at all. So really, the whole thing is, let's look at the property before we decide
Right.
you can have one.
That's right.
And I think everything else would just fall right into place.
Thank you.
And as far as how much they cost, I don't know. People, you know, we help people out that don't have any money. Okay, so I don't know, maybe you have to figure out a way. Basically, the people that need these are in lower income neighborhoods, or else they'd have a driveway. So that's something that we elect you to make decisions like that. But I think you gotta look at who you're giving it to, and the rest will take care of itself. Thank you.
Thank you. I would have to say, and the subcommittee would agree with me, that from this day on, anyone who applies for a residential parking sign, Adam Bakey is here, the city clerk would, first of all, have to go out and survey, or someone would have to survey from the city to see if the sign is warranted. And that should have happened probably back in the 90s, and it didn't. It didn't happen. And we're going to see if we can work to correct it and find a solution to the problem. Anyone else like to come to the podium and speak?
Hi, Shirley Perry, 7 West Burnside Avenue. And if you know Centerville, you know the alley. Very similar to one-way. There is parking on one side of the street. My house is on the opposite side of the street. I thought our saving grace when we purchased the property was we have a driveway. It's not a saving grace when we have a person who has a placard, Shirley, has a placard in front of their house, and when you try to pull out, you run the risk of hitting their vehicle because they're blocking your driveway. They're not blocking it so you can't leave, but so that you can't swing out. So we talked to our neighbors who have their friends come, have their other friends come, and like to have 4 or 5 vehicles on our street that has 6 houses. I'm sorry, did you have a question? Okay, you look like you had a question. So there's 6 houses. We asked them, can we have a spot at the very end of the street reserved so we can park on the street, since it would give them the ability to park in front of their house, and we don't have to swing out of our driveway and have them have to move their vehicle in order to do this. We lasted for a day or two, and then more cars parked there. The reason that I came here tonight was I'd love for the street to be residents only, meaning if you live on the street, you can park on the street, not this friend, this brother, this sister, 6 cars on the street taking up the residents' parking, and when you contact the police, you're told they have a right to park there. I don't have a right to park on my street because I'm on the opposite side of the street where if it's, an alley, you have one side where all the cars park and you have one it's similar to a one-way street. I'm on the opposite side, so I cannot park in front of my house. That, this is the first time I think I've been to a subcommittee meeting, because our 5 other neighbors are wonderful. It's one house that feel as though they have the right to have as many vehicles, and the police have told us they have the right to park on the street. And that's why I'm here tonight. They do have a placard in front of their house, but they take up more than one space in front of their house.
That is 7 Burnside.
7 West Burnside.
West Burnside Avenue?
Yep,
And,
that's our house,
right, but
right,
it's Burnside Avenue where you're having a problem.
correct.
West Burnside.
Yep,
Go ahead.
One of the reasons is,
Why don't you speak right into the microphone and give us your name, please?
Carol Perry, 7 West Burnside Ave. About 3 weeks ago, we had a parking issue. There's we're the end house on our street, and there's a house on Stanley Street that our houses back up to their backyards. They have a fence along the side of the street that runs to the end of the street. Now, you can get 3 cars on that fence. And one night, didn't park in front of their house. There was a car, the one we told you about, that was broken down on a jack, a van. I parked behind the van. The back end of my truck was about a foot in front of their gate. She said, I can't park there. I said, I'm not blocking your house. There was another gate halfway down the house for the back. They called the police. The officer said, I can't block their gate. I had to move my car, but yet there was a broken down car that was theirs and a van on this fence, and there was another car behind mine. So there were 3 cars on their property, but I had to park off of my street because I was blocking their gate. But there's 2 gates to that property, a front door and a back door.
and it wasn't you blocking the gate, it just couldn't swing all the way open. It could open, but it couldn't open all the way around.
And that was when the officer said, they have the right to park on the street as much as anybody else does. But it seems like they feel as though they can have as many people as they want, because this particular house it has an extreme turnaround of people coming in and
Cars.
staying.
Week or 2.
I asked the mailman one day, I said, how many people?
Where is West Burnside Avenue located in the city?
It's
by
between
West
Stanley, it's
Off
between
West Sixth
Stanley
Street?
and Fulton. It's off of West Sixth.
Okay, I'm familiar with it, right.
And The mailman said that this particular house has 6 people that are getting registered mail to that house.
Thank you.
I just have a question, Mr. Chairman. Is that vehicle up on blocks still there?
No,
as-
they moved it about a week later.
Okay,
But now, we have a driveway, she has a smaller car, she can park in it. I bought a brand-new truck, I can't park my truck in my driveway, even if she parked her car, because it's a bigger vehicle. I can't make a swing if they park in front of their house. And I asked the officer, I said, do I have the right to use my driveway? And he said, yes, you do. But he said, if you make that an issue, it's only gonna compound things. So I just said, fine, I just want a parking spot along the fence, just somewhere that I can park on my own street. And we don't get it.
could we make a motion to send the traffic engineer?
Well, I'm going to ask Mr. Baker if he come forward, and we'll discuss all these issues and address them. I think 7 West Burnside Avenue is a typical problem that exists in the city, and we don't know nothing about it.
But we'd like to, and we've talked to all of the neighbors on the street, with the exception of the house that has multiple cars, and everybody on the street would love to have it resident parking, which would give, if everybody had 2 cars, we could all, there's enough parking, but it's when they have 3 and 4 cars visiting that they feel as though they can take a spot. So we'd like to be able to make this street
Residential.
resident, it's just an alley.
Stick-up parking. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to come to the podium? Adam, why don't you come right in and sit down? Anyone else like to come to the podium? Come on. Okay, yeah, that's
That's all
okay.
right.
We're not, we throw all those rules and regulations out the window. Just bring that microphone right down and
Thank you.
enjoy.
I'm Priscilla Perret on 68 Beacon Street, and I think the form that you have in front of you is my original form. I hope that I have never abused the privilege of having that sign. However, I thought for comment, it might be interesting to check. My permit number is 4,326. I wonder what the number of permits are now in the city. How many more have, increased?
Yours is 4,000?
4,326. It's the one that you have, the form you have right there.
Hello.
Another thing that I might point out is, I don't know how old it is because there's no date on it. However, if you note the telephone numbers, there's no code, area code before it. So it had to be quite a while ago. Because
right.
it's 970, there's no, there's not even, we were 508, I believe.
Yeah.
Originally, so it's quite old. But I am a saver, and I did have that. But I just thought I'd, question not question, but note that the number and what the number is now of permits, and that the telephone number. So, thank you very much.
Thank you for being here, appreciate it. Adam, thanks for being here, and this is, of the thousands of signs that are out there, I have to say 90% of them are probably adhering to the ordinance and the rules and regulations, but that 10% is probably what we have to look at, and Council Broderick made a motion, it was seconded by Council Rita Mercier. The motion was unanimously adopted to take a survey neighborhood by neighborhood and see if there's any violations out there. If people don't have the sign in front of their door, or if there's 2 signs, to see if there's, these rules and regulations are being violated. And I do know, on 135 Beacon Street, that sign, the resident is taking up 75 feet of the street. And it's only, they have a 2-car driveway and another driveway on the side of the house. So I would like to see that any more signs that are issued, that everyone who applies for that sign, someone will go out and investigate, see if the sign is warranted, and the signs that are out there now to see if there's any violations. And if we can get the gentleman or the resident at 135 Beacon Street to move the sign in front of their door, so they're entitled to one parking space, which will open up the street for other people. So any comments on that, I certainly would appreciate it.
Sure, thank you, and good evening. I apologize for being a little bit late to the meeting this evening. I actually had mixed up the time that it was starting and thought it was a 5:30 meeting, so I apologize for that to those who spoke before I got here. I guess I'll take those issues that you raised sort of one at a time, although they're somewhat interrelated. Unfortunately, the large challenge is that in order to do some of the things that I think are desired here, and I don't disagree with, I think there may need to be a change to the ordinance to actually empower our inspectors to do the things you're actually asking them to do.
That was actually the motion, was to,
Right. Enforcement. Yeah.
Yeah.
to look at the ordinance first, to see what the requirements were and what restrictions might be necessary prior to, I mean, we can enforce what we have, but this document it doesn't say in front of someone's door, it says
Right.
in front of any house. So I think we have a little problem in terms of interpretation as well, so we gotta revamp the document, but I think the ordinance, the motion really was dealing with the ordinance more so than the enforcement.
Yeah, and again, we're happy to obviously work with the law department and obviously with the council to craft amendments to the ordinance that will achieve the things that the community is looking for. But I think unfortunately the existing wording of the ordinance would not allow us to do some of the things that are being requested tonight prior to making those changes. I mean, for example, I certainly sympathize with the idea that those who have ample off-street parking in neighborhoods where off-street parking is plentiful probably are not the people for whom the council back in the 1980s thought that this ordinance was intended. But there is nothing in the ordinance, other than in the Back Central neighborhood, that allows us to review a property and say, well, you have a driveway, so therefore we're not going to give you a sign. Obviously, if it's the will of the council to establish that standard throughout the city, we would certainly administer it accordingly. Similarly, I agree that the placement of the signs on the property may create the impression on the part of people who are debating whether or not they can legally park somewhere that the parking space being reserved is in front of the sign. And I would interpret it the same way out in the field. The ordinance is clear that the space being reserved is in front of the house, but the ordinance is not clear that the sign itself has to be literally in front of the front door of the house, which obviously creates a clear opportunity for misunderstandings. And that's another area where, again, if we can clarify the ordinance language a bit, it will be a lot easier to handle those. We actually had our inspectors go out and take a look at 135 Beacon, and unfortunately, they were unable to demand change. They did attempt to speak with the owner of that property and ask if they could just courteously move the sign to a location that was more consistent with the space that was actually being reserved under the ordinance. And he said the owner indicated to our inspector that he would consider it. And I guess, based on the testimony this evening,
The owner said he would consider?
he would consider it.
Well,
But at the moment,
that's
that
that's not a good answer.
No,
Oh,
The answer here is, this is the rules and regulations that they took the sign with.
yeah,
And that they should follow the rules and regulations, or the sign should be taken off them.
that's right.
Right, again, the challenge is, it's not clear that we have the authority to, we do have the authority to say where the parking space that he is reserving is. It is not clear that the ordinance gives us the authority to say exactly where he can place the sign. It would be helpful in cases like this one, if the ordinance was clarified, to be specific as to that effect, and then I think at that point, in this case and in others like it, we could be able to enforce it more effectively.
Council Broderick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Excuse me. Mr. Becky, in reading this, think this has to be redone. And I think it's clear that it's unclear. I don't know how you enforce something that says it has to be, one space is allowed for one vehicle in front of any house. It does not say that the sign has to be placed in any particular location. It does not say where the priority of where that parking space should be. If there's a fire hydrant right in front of your house, then you can't park there, no matter what our sign says. So, or if there's a guardrail, it may not make sense. So I think this has to be expounded upon based upon the fact that there are some issues now, and it's like we do with the regular zoning, and when challenges come up, we have to change it. So I think that we have to look at that and make it more clear. And part of that is going to have to be some ability, clear ability for enforcement to revoke the sign, because I don't see anything in here that allows the city to revoke it ever for $10. So I think that's why my suggestion was we have to redo this ordinance. And I think two things. One, so that it's enforceable, it's clear and enforceable, and also so that we have some type of, in my opinion anyway, some type of requirements that need to be based on necessity. And in doing that, I'm not all that familiar with the city's GIS capabilities. I know in building permit situations, people bring down copies of their plot plan and so on. So if you could maybe incorporate some idea, or come back with some ideas in terms of if someone's coming in for a permit, is it on the city clerk to get on the GIS system and find out where this property is and what their driveway, where they are? Or should this be on the applicant and to come in with an application and give a plot plan? Oh, what's reasonable? We're talking about a parking space, not an addition that might infringe on somebody else's rights. However, the parking space in some situations, if it's not going to be necessary, may in fact cause a problem in the neighborhood. So that would be one of the things that I would ask if you could take a look at as well. And also, how do we deal with it on one-way streets, if there could be some type of residential requirement as opposed to a no parking that can accommodate everyone. I mean, we're all neighbors together, so the fact that you say, look, we can park on my side, sorry, you're out of luck, that doesn't sound like it makes a whole lot of sense, or it's very neighborly. So there are situations, and it's going to probably get worse as the winter comes, where if you have trouble getting in and out of your driveway, I know if people park across the street from my house, when I'm trying to get out of my driveway, it can be difficult. So we have to be mindful of that. We can't fix every problem in the city, every parking problem in the city. I think everyone understands that, but I think, to help maybe with the spirit of cooperation in some of these areas, and I know this is going to be a pretty large task, but maybe we start with the ordinance in terms of the parking sign and some types of maybe restrictions for requirements, and also in looking at the application or the permit itself in terms of being clear as to where the sign needs to go and what the enforcements are, and it's not an entitlement that if you don't do what you're supposed to do, then you could lose it. But that's the gist of the motion. Thank you.
That was the original motion, to refer this to the law department to review the ordinance and for amendments and so forth. That's the motion?
TPD, yeah, with the
Planning
planning
Plan.
development.
That's the motion you presented earlier?
Yes.
Right, okay. And also, if we could, Adam, if we can look at 7 West Burnside Avenue, the problem that exists there, I think that's a lot bigger than just the residential parking signs. I think people are not being friendly to their fellow neighbors, so. Is that the question you wanted to pose?
No, what I was wondering is, like you said, people applying for new signs, but is a sign a grandfathered in sign? Because the sign that's on the house across the street from us, we've been there for 15 years, the sign's been there for 15 years, but there's new residents. So does that sign go with the house?
City solicitor? Solicitor O'Connor?
That was, it's, because like I said, the original owner that owned the house had the sign, we didn't have any problem, he only had one car. But the house has been sold, the landlord doesn't live there. It's a rental property. And it's the same sign, and I was just wondering, are they grandfathered in? Because you had mentioned people applying for new signs, but if somebody buys a house and has a sign, they get a sign.
This permit example we have is in a name and an address. So I think, again, it creates some confusion as to enforcement. I would look at this and say this was granted to Joseph A. Perry, not to 68 Beacon Street. But
That that was my other question is, you know, do people, if a house is sold, do you have to apply for the sign as a new owner?
Yes,
Is there anyone else who'd like to come to the podium?
Anne Marie.
Come forward. Just give us your name, please.
My name is Anne Marie Page. I live at 26 Fremont Street, Lowell, Mass. And I'm a member of the Centerville Neighborhood Action Group. We want to say thank you for your time and all your work, and I think you've hit it right on the head. It has to be revised and renewed. You know, things are falling through the cracks, and, you know, when you can, and by no way should you be able to go and buy a sign and put it on your front lawn or your front fence, don't park here, I don't like you, you know, I mean, that's not nice. That's not nice. And we know that when it was implemented, there was a very good reason. We have some houses very close. We realized that they were probably here with the horse and carriage and all that stuff, before cars or whatever, but they're very close. And so when it was implemented, it was a good plan, but it's been abused and misused, and now it's becoming unfriendly in certain parts. So we're very happy that you're going to look at it and review it and revise it. We appreciate that very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else?
I spoke earlier, I don't know if you were here, my name's Marie Brown, I live at 380 Christian Street in Lowell. The one thing I would ask, that when you are designing the new placards, could it please say, one space, 16 by 20? Put the dimensions in there so that when it goes in front of the house and you have places for 4 cars to park, whoever's reading that sign knows they only have to leave one space. Because, you know, I've actually seen people who have a lockbox on the house. That sign goes up in front of their house whenever they're not showing the property. But as soon as they're showing the property, it goes behind the bush next to the front stairs, because they don't want their property to look unfriendly for someone who's going to think about living here. I've seen it happen. So I really think it's important that it says one space and that it says 16 by 20 and 6 feet by 20. And for everybody on the west side of 6th Street, one parking spot, whatever the dimensions are for one car to park. And anything on West 6th Street, my thought might be, instead of having the signs in front of the houses, and it's just gonna be parking for the residents who live there, maybe they should have a sticker in their windshield, rather than a sign on the front of the property. Sure, with I don't know how you could do it. You'd have to do it with a number and give them paper, because you can't write the address of the car on the sticker.
Yeah.
But if
there's
you
an
have
inch sticker
sticker
parking.
numbers, a number's just a number, but a police officer would be able to see that, and know what it was, because the person would have the paperwork in the house, right? So, I don't know, just a couple of thoughts.
Well, before we, yes, Counsel?
Well, it should be noted that the signs that say no parking or you'll be towed are not issued by the city and are not enforceable by our ordinance. So those are just there for scare tactics on the part of the owners of that property. The ones that we issue are from the building department, and they say per order of the building commissioner. And as you see on the form there that they receive, it doesn't include towing, it's just the fine, that's it. And so if you do see a sign that says no parking or you'll be towed, it's probably not issued from the city, it's not enforceable by ordinance. The only way they could have it towed is if the vehicle is blocking someone's driveway.
Right.
Otherwise, it's not enforceable.
Well, it's been a very productive meeting, and Counsel?
Just before you close, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank the subcommittee for your time and taking up this motion, as well as Heidi Miller and her neighbors for coming down. I think this is such a positive step to move forward in this parking issue, because we know this is not the only area in the neighborhood. I know as long as I have sat here this periodically comes up in various neighborhoods in the city where where there is a shortage of parking, or say even Pawtuckaville, where parking is a problem when students are in session. So I completely agree, and I support the motions to take a look at this ordinance and see how we can revise it and revamp it and bring it into get more compliance and give the neighbors an opportunity, through enforcement and just tighten it up a little bit. So I thank the subcommittee as well as Adam Bakey and the solicitor's office for looking at this. I think parking is in all neighborhoods will be positively affected by these changes. So I just want to thank you and state that publicly.
Thank you. It's been a very productive meeting, and I want to thank everyone for your attendance, residents and city officials and councilors. And I think that the big positive thing that come out of this meeting was the motion filed by Councilor Broderick, seconded by Councilor Mercier, also supported by me, that the law department looking into the ordinance, amending the ordinance, coming up with language that we can all understand and know, and so it's enforceable. And so no one is taking advantage of that little red and white sign, and you can't park in front of my house, no how, no way, so forth. So what has happened up in Beacon Street, I think, is just the tip of the iceberg, and I want to thank Mrs. Miller for bringing this forward. And we're going to recess this meeting. We're going to meet again in 2 weeks. Same time, same place, and hopefully we can come up with something that's doable, come up with an answer to the problems that exist. And Adam, if we can look at 7 West Burnside Avenue, I think there's abuse going on there as well. So any other questions? You can see why I asked for meetings at 5 o'clock instead of 5:30. It gives you ample time for everyone to speak and come up with issues and questions and answers and so forth. So thank you for your attendance. Motion to recess by Councilor Broderick, seconded by Councilor Mercier. All in favor signify by saying aye. We are in recess until December 1st, I believe. 2 weeks. Don't thank us until we do something.